Hey true believers, ENGLENTINE here with another community video. Now, if you are unfamiliar with these, for the last couple of weeks, I take somebody who has less subscribers than I do, and they give me a video of their choice, and I put it on my channel in order to get them just a little bit more advertising, because I think some of these, they're very good. And I understand how hard it is to get to where I am, much less, you know, say like Diversity in Comics, how many subscribers he's got. So I try to help out. Now they choose the video and do give me permission to do this. I'll leave a link in the description below. See if you like what they have to say. I really enjoy this video. It's by a gentleman named Unranked Chevron, who joined us in a live stream recently talking about Thor Ragnarok. Entertaining, informative, that's what we all like. It's about classic literature versus the modern day SJW Marvel stance. So, hey, hope you like it.
A few days ago, Douglas Ernst did an awesome live stream in which he talked to some of his subscribers. In it, he mentioned this.
Here's the deal. And Marvel, they don't seem to get this. That there is an infinite amount of awesome ideas out in the cosmos. And the job of the writer is to pluck those ideas out of the cosmos and put them before the reader.
Then, shortly after that, he said this.
The ancients thought that stories were written in the sky.
Now, Doug said that because he was quoting my comment from the super chat. Now, that sounds like some hippy-dippy LSD tripping babble talk. But I'm not a hippie, and actually I've never done illicit drugs. I meant what I said very literally. Our ancestors told stories that they believed were the reflections of the very heavens. They looked to the stars, and they saw characters, intrigues, plots, romances, despairs, deaths, and rebirths that were far older than any one person and had been there since the dawn of time. As an example, I'm going to recount for you one of the oldest stories of which we have any kind of record. It's an ancient Sumerian tale called The Descent of Inanna into the Underworld. It was found on a clay tablet written in cuneiform that dates from about 4,000 years ago. It encompasses 415 lines. The story that it recounts is certainly much older than the tablet on which it was found, having been transmitted by oral tradition. Many elements of it are somewhat obtuse to a contemporary audience, but someone at the time would have understood the context well. Inanna, or Ishtar, or Ashtoreth, or any one of a number of names throughout the Near East, was the Mesopotamian goddess of both sexual love and war. She was the daughter of the sky god Anu, and was known as the Queen of Heaven. Her husband was the mortal Tammuz, who was also known as Dumuzi or Adonis, who represented the spirit of vegetation and farming. Her sister was Ereshkigal, the Queen of the Underworld, or the Realm of the Dead. The tale concerns Inanna descending to the underworld in order to attend the funeral of her brother-in-law, Gugalana, also known as the Bull of Heaven. I'm going to recount an abbreviated version of this story for clarity's sake. Then I'm going to give you some more context and some of the interpretations of it that have been posited over the years. Okay, here we go. From the great heaven the goddess set her mind on the great below. She abandoned her cities, she abandoned her temples, she abandoned her people, and she descended to the underworld. She took her 7 divine powers and fashioned them into raiment for her journey. She placed a crown on her head, lapis lazuli beads on her ears, a double-stranded necklace around her neck. She wore a breechcloth, a breastplate, a girdle, and carried with her a measuring rod. Before she made her descent, she took aside her servant, Ninshuber, and explained to her how to retrieve her mistress from the underworld. Then the goddess came to the door of the underworld. She declared to the doorman Neti, "Open up, I want to come in." The doorman asked for her name, and the goddess said, "I am Inanna, and I am going to the east." The doorman asked, "If you are going to the east, why are you seeking the land of no return?" "I am going to my sister Ereshkigal's realm, so that I may observe the funeral rites of my brother-in-law." Neti, the doorman, said that he would speak to his mistress. He told Ereshkigal, the queen of the underworld, that her sister demanded entrance to her realm. Ereshkigal became enraged. She told Neti to bolt the 7 gates of the underworld and allow Inanna to enter each gate only after surrendering one of her vestments of divine power, so that she may enter the underworld bowed and low. And so the doorman did, and as Inanna came to each gate she found it bolted. The doors were opened in succession, and each time servants took clothing from Inanna. Each time she asked, "What is this?" and Nedi answered, "Be satisfied, Inanna. A divine power of the underworld has been fulfilled. You must not open your mouth against the rights of the underworld." She made her way to the underworld, bowed and low. She made Ereshkigal rise from her throne and sat herself on it. Then Inanna was surrounded by the Anuna, the 7 judges of the underworld. They spoke at her with the words of guilt. They shouted at her with the shout of anger, and they looked at her with the look of death. Her body fell and turned into a rotting corpse. The corpse was hung from a hook on the wall of the throne room. 3 days and 3 nights passed, and her servant Ninshuber feared for her mistress. She remembered what her mistress had told her, and she besought the gods for help. But all the gods turned her away, save Enki, the god of magic and mischief. He mourned for Inanna and created 2 servants to retrieve her. He gave them instructions so as to save her. The 2 servants entered the underworld like flies. They found Ereshkigal in pain, as if she was giving birth. Each time she cried out in pain, they would empathize with her pain. Finally, she offered them a gift. The servants simply said that they wanted the corpse on the wall, just as Enki had told them to say. Ereshkigal gave it to them, and the servants gave the corpse the water and grain of life that Enki had given them. Inanna rose, her body restored. She prepared to leave the underworld, but the Anuna again surrounded her. They told her that one cannot leave the underworld without providing a substitute. The goddess ascended from the underworld. Her vestments of power were returned to her. Her servant met her at the first gate. Ninshuber begged to take Inanna's place, but the goddess could not turn over one whom had been so faithful to her. Many others asked to take Inanna's place in the underworld, but she could not turn over those that had remained faithful to her in her absence. Finally, she returned to her throne, and found her husband Tammuz sitting on her throne wearing stately regala. It angered her that her husband had not mourned her absence, and so she offered him as a substitute. After he was taken, Inanna mourned her husband's absence. Yeshtinanna, Tammuz's sister, also wailed, and begged Inanna to take her brother's place. Inanna turned both of them into gods, and said that for half the year, Tammuz would be in the underworld, and the other half, Yeshtinanna would take his place. And thus the story ends, with a statement of praise to Ereshkigal. Okay, so that was the abridged version. For a story that's 4,000 years old, there are obviously going to be many different interpretations and many angles from which to approach it. From the historical to the Jungian to the weirdly predictable feminist viewpoint, many different people have looked at this from different points of view over the years. I personally favor the rather simple explanation that the story is simply about the consequences of one's own actions. Both Inanna and her husband try to usurp power that isn't theirs, but it's not only them that suffer the consequences for it, it's others, like Tammuz's sister, that have nothing to do with the events. So the moral of the story, to the average person listening to that story, would likely have been, bad things happen, and it's not always the fault of those on the receiving end of it. But that's not the end of the story. Inanna, or Ishtar, was associated with the planet Venus. From the perspective of someone on Earth, Venus has a very strange orbit. Venus starts off by being in the west, where you can only see it in the evening as the evening star. Then it disappears for about 3 days, and reappears in the east as the morning star. So, that puts Inanna's journey of going to the underworld, saying she's going to the east, staying there for 3 days, and then reappearing in a wholly different light. It would be easy to say that this myth was meant as an explanation for Venus's strange orbit, but contrast Inanna's journey with the consigning of Inanna's husband Tammuz to the underworld for 6 months out of the year. Tammuz is the spirit of vegetation. He's immortal, but he also has a part to play. So it's fairly clear that, much like the myth of Persephone, this is meant as an explanation for the changing of the seasons. Inanna, however, only makes this journey once. So while this may be meant to explain Venus's orbit, I don't think that it fully does. I think that our ancestors saw this story that plays out year after year and decided to tell it their way. Venus has been making its orbit for billions of years, and the story that was inspired by it has been around for 4,000. Whomever wrote it on a clay tablet in ancient Mesopotamia meant for the story to be around a long time. They were making a story that was meant to survive through the ages and speak to people on a universal level. So what was the point of recounting this whole story? Well, consider what modern-day SJW Marvel is doing. Nothing dates a work more than attempts at being relevant. They are currently, openly, pushing a political agenda, using characters that have been around longer than most of the personnel there have been alive. And the political agenda that they're pushing is painfully temporal. Most of these SJW comics will be embarrassingly dated just a few years from now. The problem with the SJW mindset is that it is a philosophy built entirely on resentment and the desire to tear down that which has come before. People that have made themselves beholden to the modern-day progressive mindset have determined that virtue is to be found only in one's opposition to the moral paradigm of the past, whether they call it patriarchy, heteronormativity, white supremacy, or all three of them. When people with this mindset get into positions of influence, we see time and time again that they dedicate their energy to undoing anything that smacks of what in their minds are these outdated concepts. They don't even try terribly hard to understand that which has come before. Why would they? It's all racist, sexist, and homophobic anyway. So the effect is that they ignore good storytelling and universal themes in favor of avoiding anything that could reinforce values which they believe to be immoral. They are possessed of a dangerous combination of zealotry and ignorance, which leads them to be humorless and narrow-minded scolds, without even the quality which the old religious scolds possessed, which is that they at least were admonishing for a lifestyle that has been proven to last. A few years ago, feminist and academic Camille Paglia wrote about the outrage over the Miley Cyrus twerking fiasco. She wrote, "The Cyrus fiasco, however, is symptomatic of the still heavy influence of Madonna, who sprang to world fame in the 1980s with sophisticated videos that were suffused with a daring European art film eroticism, and that were arguably among the best artworks of the decade. Madonna's provocations were smolderingly sexy because she had a good Catholic girl's keen sense of transgression. Subversion requires limits to violate." And in the same article, Paglia said, "But more important, Madonna, a trained modern dancer, was originally inspired by works of tremendous quality. Above all, Marlene Dietrich's glamorous movie roles as a bisexual blonde dominatrix and Bob Fosse's stunningly forceful strip club choreography for the 1972 film Cabaret, set in decadent Weimar-era Berlin. Today's aspiring singers, teethed on frenetically edited small-screen videos, rarely have direct contact with those superb precursors and are simply aping feeble imitations of Madonna at 10th remove." The point that she was trying to make was that Madonna was genuinely transgressive because she had a keen understanding of the tradition that she had inherited. She knew not only about classical music and classical dance, but the classical values of her Roman Catholic upbringing. Miley Cyrus, on the other hand, was raised in a post-Madonna world where everything is transgression. So when she made a fool of herself at the MTV Music Awards, it was an attempt to be shocking without having the keen understanding of what is shocking. Now, I don't mean that modern-day comics pros don't understand the comics that have come before. I'm sure that they could quote you issue and volume numbers and go into detail about the personnel on various creative runs. But my point is that I think they lack the moral undergirding that previous comics pros possessed. It's not like people like Jack Kirby, Denny O'Neil, Julie Schwartz, Martin Goodman, Steve Ditko, etc. were saints. They definitely weren't, but they had a better understanding of values and morality just from simply living in a culture that was inundated with it. Every week, most people went to church, even if only begrudgingly. Every school kid would have read classical literature, even if they hated it. Every college student would have had a liberal arts education, no matter what major they were in. People were just simply more exposed to those foundational ideas that have led to our modern day culture. One thing that people like to say is that superheroes are modern day gods. But it seems like very few comics pros have internalized that or bothered to understand it. Instead, you have ideologues like Nick Spencer who read old comic books and all he sees is ideology. And it never seems to occur to him that if there is an ideology in old comics, then that's a fault on them, and maybe even a fault in himself for seeing that. Those old issues, like the old myths that have survived the ages, resonate still today because they touch on universal experiences like grief, loss, pain, happiness, love, responsibility, and death. SJW Marvel, even when they're trying their hardest with Secret Empire, can't even come close to that. Now, is it fair to compare modern comics to a story that's survived for 4,000 years? Probably not. But at the same time, if that's the standard you hold yourself to, if you try and create stories that'll still hold up for 4 millennia from now, you may at least maintain relevance for a few years. Most of the characters that SJW Marvel has inherited from its predecessors will be around longer than most of these creators will be alive. And I don't think that people will look kindly back on those who treated this heritage so flippantly. So tell me what you think. In any case, this is Unranked Chevron signing off.
So there you go, true believers. What did you think? What do you think of Unranked Chevron's video? What do you think of the points he made? And what do you think of this particular style here, the community videos I'm trying to share to get some more attention to the smaller YouTube channels? Let me know in the comments below. I will definitely let Unranked Chevron know any comments directed at him so he can answer you. The link to his channel is in the description below, so please go on over there and subscribe. Do all the same things. Share, like, subscribe, same here. Hit the notification bell so you don't miss anything. I don't know about him, he didn't tell me, but I do have a Patreon page or VIDME, so if you don't mind helping out and keeping the lights on here and helping us to keep making videos for you, just go on over, links in the description below. Drop $1 in the till, help us out. We thank everybody who's already done that. And to everyone, all of the true believers, say thank you very much for watching.